Martial arts come from all over the world. Each area has its own culture, its own history, and its own language. But should we keep that language when we train? Hey, what's up? I'm Ken. This is kenfuTV, and each week I release videos on the martial arts, philosophy, technique, training, all of that sort of thing. And today we're doing Ken Learns Kenfu, where I reflect on just different thought processes and different things that come across my mind while I'm training and continuing to study. So the question came up recently, should we teach in Japanese for us karate people? But really this could go for any martial art. Should I teach in Cebuano or Tagalog for my Filipino martial art? Should someone teach Korean for Taekwondo? Should people teach in Chinese when they're teaching Kung Fu or Tai Chi, Wing Chun, all of those? Should we teach in those languages, or should we teach in the language of the area we live in? Which for me, United States, that's English. Should I be teaching in English instead of Japanese when I teach karate? I'm going to start off with the obvious thing. You should teach what you think you should teach. You should teach what you're comfortable with. I'm going to give reasons why I continue to teach in Japanese, but that doesn't mean that that's the only language you can teach in, and that doesn't mean that you shouldn't feel comfortable doing something different if you feel that you have strong reason to do so. At the end of the day, this is your training. If it increases your ability to get what you're trying to communicate over to your students and the people that you train with, you need to do that. You need to do whatever that looks like. For me, I've chosen to weave the culture and the language in because I believe that that's a really core component. I'll throw a link up here and down here to a video where I talk about the 5 things that I think should be included to fully incorporate a deeper understanding of a martial art, which includes things like the history and the culture and the environment and things like that. But today, let's just focus on language. Why do I teach in Japanese? Firstly, probably the most easily, I was taught in Japanese. So it's a continuation of a tradition, and I continue to do that. But since then, I've continued to have stronger feelings about doing it. While people have thought about moving away from that, I feel stronger about staying with it, in fact, using it maybe even more. That said, I don't teach the whole class in Japanese. First off, I'm not fluent. I can say a few things. I can certainly speak in the dojo, but I'm not to where I can hold a conversation. So no, I'm not going to teach the entire class in Japanese, but I am going to use terminology. I am going to use those things as I teach. So let's talk about why. Firstly, something I believe is that if you work in that language, so in this case, Japanese, it's going to be easier if you go train somewhere else, because even if you don't speak the language of that place, maybe I get a chance to travel to Japan and the person that I'm training with doesn't speak very good English and I don't speak very good Japanese, but if we can communicate expectations of what we're doing, the techniques, things like that in a common language, that's going to make it really, really easy for us to train together, even though we might not be able to converse very well. Same thing goes if, maybe I want to go train somewhere else. Happens to continue to train that. So maybe I'm in Germany or Russia or who knows where, and I'm not fluent in those languages, but I have an opportunity to train with people. If they use the same terminology that I do, it's going to be really easy. If they say, hey, throw a mic at you, I'm going to know what that is. Whereas if they say it in German, I might not have a clue what they're telling me. Just like if they came to me and I say it in English, they might not know what I'm saying. So we have a common language. I think that's a really important component. Second, I do believe that there's understanding inside that language. As I've continued to study, something that I've continued to gain deeper understanding of are different techniques and things because of the names, because of the terminology, because of what they're called and how they're referred to. Understanding, let's use the simple obvious ones that everybody's heard, okay? I'll choose 2 of those. First is the idea of uke. So you have your ageukes and your uchiukes and sotukes, your different blocks, they say. But the word comes from ukeru, which means to receive. Well, I've never blocked a gift when somebody's trying to give me a gift, right? But I have received it. When you think about that, if someone's given you technique, you're in a situation where you're defending yourself and someone is giving you technique, they're doing something to you, I could stop it or I could use it. I prefer the idea of using it. And when you think of it in that way, that I'm receiving this technique, I'm not blocking this technique, I'm receiving it and changing it or doing something to it or with it, there's a big benefit to the understanding of what you could do in that situation and how to apply what you're doing. When I'm not trying to stop things, it's easier for me to continue them moving into something else. And that really opens up the options, right? So there's the first simple one, the idea of receiving rather than blocking. Second is the idea of the hikite, the pulling hand. The word itself means pulling hand. It doesn't mean forced generation. It doesn't mean all these different things, right? It doesn't mean this is a good chamber position that you should have your hand in. It means that you should pull something with this. When my hand rips back this way, it's not ripping back to generate more speed in this arm. It's not ripping back to generate more force in this arm. It's ripping back to pull on you, to twist you and move you in a way that gives me advantage. Without that, if somebody just said, hey, this hand on your hip, hand on your hip. In English, hand on your hip might be exactly what that position is, but it doesn't tell me what it's doing. So when working technique and learning, if I'd only ever heard put your hand on your hip, then I never would have understood that there was more to it and why I'm putting my hand on my hip. And I think that the knowledge that's contained in why they chose to call things the way they did in any art, in any language, it was there for a reason. I think that reason should continue to be conveyed. It doesn't have to be, and when I teach in both. Right? I try to use the Japanese very frequent so people hear it, they get comfortable with it, they recognize it, but I'll use it in English too. That doesn't mean that I only teach in Japanese. I mean, I can say, hey, do an inner block. Sometimes hearing it in English helps. It becomes easier. The longer they train, the easier it is for them to do it in Japanese. But initially, it's good to have both, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm not leaving that out. Number 3 is one that I will address, but it's not one that I specifically follow, is the idea you'll hear people say, well, I speak that language to honor the culture and the history of the art and honor all of that. I think it's important to honor the things that we're given, but I don't think that speaking the language is necessarily doing that. If you speak the language poorly or use it improperly, are you really honoring it? Or are you just saying the words hoping that you're honoring it, but really dishonoring it by not using it well, by calling things the wrong thing and not truly understanding? So I don't buy that one. That one doesn't stick for me. So I throw it out. There's ways to show honor to your art, and I think that's by doing the art well, training hard, and continuing to pass that on to people. If the language is included in that, awesome. If it's not, I'm not going to tell you yes or no on that. But number 4, I think one of the biggest things that you get out of it is a sense of time and place. And I don't mean historically this puts me in the mind of an old Japanese guy. I mean that it's like changing your clothes when you get home from work. It's like putting on your uniform. It's like teaching military and police dogs in a language other than their own. There's less confusion of what you're doing. So if I come in the dojo and I'm speaking Japanese while I'm doing different things, that's obvious to me without saying anything. That's dojo time. I'm doing things, I'm wearing clothes, I'm speaking things that only happen in that room, and that helps be in that room. It helps be in that space and in that mindset. And I think that's really important. When you don't have that, some people train in regular clothes and things like that, and I don't have a problem with that. But for me, I like to put on my gi. One, I think it's a great tool. You can rip on it and tear on it, and it's designed to be sturdy while you work techniques and throw each other around and stuff like that. I'm not worried about tearing my t-shirts and all of that sort of thing. But 2, it helps me get into the mind space. And all of that goes together. The ceremony, the bowing, the gi, all of that kind of stuff. It helps me be in that place and separate this from somewhere else. The dojo is not my day-to-day, and it's not meant to replace my day-to-day. So I think it's really important that I have things that allow me to separate that time. I'm learning how to be violent while learning how to be respectful, while learning how to be disciplined and controlled. All of those things are taking place, and they should be contained to there, and the distilled versions of them, the discipline and the control, should be the things that come out with me. That violence shouldn't leave the room. That's not why you're learning it. And so it's important that you recognize there's a time and a place. And I think having those things where things are done separately helps just send that home. This is the time and the place. I wear these things, I do these things, I say these things. This is my escape in some ways. If nothing else, this defines an environment where these things happen. Some separation, can leave my stuff outside, come in and train, and that stuff will be there when I come back. So no big deal, but it helps. Not everybody needs that, but some people really need that. And I think it's good. Maybe a number 5, a bonus one, is just the idea, same as the gi, same as the ceremony, same as all that stuff, is just the idea of coming together. Being part of a group. These are things that you do together that maybe you don't do with other people, and they allow you to have that connection to somebody and kind of give you that togetherness that maybe you don't get outside of that, right? It's just putting it together for you. It's just allowing that bond to grow with those people. These are things that you do together, experiences that you go through together. By sharing that, you're sharing yourself. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having that. So if you decide that you want to train and you want to teach in English or Spanish or whatever your native language is, and you think that that's the best way to do it, do it. There's nothing wrong with that. I encourage you to try to be accurate. If you're going to use words to replace words, make sure they still convey the same thing. If you're not saying the same thing, then you're creating confusion. And even down the road, if somebody starts to come to understand that, they might be like, well, why were you teaching it to me like this? And that just confusion is unnecessary. So just try to be accurate if you're going to use a different language to describe what you're doing. And if you are going to do it, feel strong in that. Don't feel like because other people say things like, should we teach in this? Or why do you teach in that language? That's not your language. Just feel confident that you have your reasons. You teach the way you teach. If somebody wants to learn from somebody else because they teach differently than you, then they should go learn from that person. People come to you as a teacher to teach as you. You shouldn't want to change your teachers. If you want to change your teacher, go change who your teacher is. Go train with somebody else. Your teacher is your teacher for a reason. You chose him for a reason. So that's it. What do you think? Do you train in your native language or do you train in the language of your art? Hit those comments below and let me know, how is it in your school? Or if you've had to kind of make this decision, talk to me about how you kind of decided that and what your thoughts were. And did I miss reasons? Does my list cover the reasons that you have? Or do you have your own reasons for teaching in the language that you teach in? That's it for today. If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button. Hop over here if you want to subscribe. Here's a playlist of videos like these, and here's a couple videos I think you might like. Again, I'm Ken, this is kenfuTV, and I hope you have a great day. Train hard, and I'll catch you in the next one.